It is Geek Radio 1490. I'm Joey Donovan. So glad to have you with us. You know, back in 1986, I was very, very pleased to see a book called My Scrapbook Memories of Dark Shadows. And I wish I had the original, but I have the third printing here in the studio with me. In addition to that, I also happen to have a copy that I purchased, and I promised her I'd buy it directly from her, but something just impressed upon me earlier this week to buy Return to Collinwood at the nearest Barnes & Noble, and suffice to say I did, and man, what great memories flooding through, and there's only one individual who could really capture the spirit and essence of the history of Dark Shadows. Kathryn Leigh Scott joins me right now as we remember Jonathan Frid on this broadcast of the Hour of Geek on Geek Radio 1490. Kathryn, are you with us?
I am. And, Joey, usually when somebody introduces me on a radio program such as this, I hear waves crashing on a rocky shore. I cannot tell you how much it means to me, especially now, to hear Josette's theme and the tinkling music box. It really makes me think of Jonathan and that beautiful moment when he handed me the music box. Do you remember that?
I do.
So lovely.
I do.
What a dear man. I miss him terribly already.
I know that I think Jonathan's second or third day was with you, when that was the bulk of that first episode, where essentially Maggie Evans, played by you, is more or less closing up shop at the coffee shop at the hotel, and obviously she's about to leave, and then out of nowhere this silhouette scares her, and but the two of you strike up a conversation, and I always thought that was a great base in a sense to build on that story, especially because Barnabas's intentions weren't exactly pure. And yet Jonathan has to portray this character of a vampire who's been unleashed from his coffin. He finds a woman who looks just like his long-lost love from 2 centuries ago, and yet he's trying to create this diabolical scheme while still trying to make himself as human as possible. Great challenges, at least where that was concerned, and at the same time, we don't know if this is going to pass 13 weeks, because they might kill him off the character. Dan Curtis has thrown everything out of the box to try and at least have a sort of gimmick to keep the shows up in the ratings. But yet, essentially, it was Jonathan who, with respects to the cast, had essentially saved the show.
Joey, blessedly, as an actor, I never had to think about any of that. All I was thinking about is that as Maggie Evans, I was locking up the Collinsport Diner. I was tired. It had been a long day. My feet hurt. I washed out the Silex coffee pot. Everybody, had gone. I was ready to lock the door, and there's a stranger at the door. And for whatever reason, Maggie not only invites him into Collinsport Diner, but she makes a fresh pot of coffee and sits and talks with him. And there you have it, these two outsiders. Maggie was very much an outsider. And, growing up on the wrong side of the tracks, motherless girl who, had an alcoholic itinerant father. And here's this stranger. Little does she know he's a stranger from another time, another place, and another world. And the two of them sit there chatting away, and a bond is formed. And later on in that same episode, she goes home, and she feels eyes watching her, a presence watching her. It's my favorite scene of all of the 1,225 episodes of Dark Shadows, and I think it was episode 213 or 214, I've forgotten now, but something like that in 1967. And I just love it. I'll go so far as to say that when I was working with Jonathan on that scene, I really didn't feel like I was acting. The two of us were simply responding to each other. And I think that Dan Curtis saw whatever it was between us, and he and the writers developed it into the story that it became. But from that first moment that I worked with Jonathan, he was very special, and we connected on some level that carried us through another 3 years of Dark Shadows.
Dark Shadows essentially was your first regular acting job. Obviously, we know of your backstory, and of course, for those who don't, go to her website, KathrynLeigHscott.com. She'll be happy to explain.
It was my very first job out of the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and there's so many reasons why I am so incredibly lucky. I've said it before, but to be a drama student, study Shakespeare and Restoration comedy, and then for your very first job, you're putting everything you've learned to work. Most actors never get to put their classical training to work. And of course, the young actors on Dark Shadows not only did that, but had the benefit of working with these veteran actors. And the other thing is that the fact that I was on the very, very first episode number 1, meant that, we were all scared to death together, even Joan Bennett and Louis Edmonds. And Alexandra Molka, and Nancy Barrett. We were all scared. We were scared together. I often think how really difficult it would have been to come into the show 6 months later or 10 months later, as Jonathan Frid did, and develop an entirely new character and take the show in a new direction. So, no, it was just remarkable, and one only realizes this when you look back.
Kathryn Leigh Scott joins us on the Hour of Geek as we talk about during the Witching Hour the life and talent of the late Jonathan Frid, the ultimate vampire, as some folks that more or less called him, from his portrayal of Barnabas Collins on Dark Shadows, with the humanity that he more or less offered to the role, and how things may have greatly changed if another actor was cast. And I know that obviously being part of that cast, you did have an Oscar nominee in Grayson Hall, who will come later on in the show, and you had an established glamour actress from the great days of filmmaking, like Joan Bennett, and you had young actors who were able to give you some more advice in terms of where Nancy Barrett and Joel Crothers, may he rest in peace, was concerned, and Louis Edmonds doing his obviously being a part of the stage and film and such, and Jonathan to come in as an established Shakespearean actor. Just what a tremendous wealth of experience. And I know that Jonathan was encouraging to Laura in terms of her auditioning. I know that during that time period, that storyline, and obviously going to the 1795 storyline, where you had a lot of great lines, scenes together. What was the one thing that that you took out from working with Jonathan during that time? Any encouragement that he was able to give to you that in a way was kind of like Joan Bennett when she suggested that where the Danish was concerned, that the figure a woman has at a certain age should be the one she keeps for her lifetime.
Yes. Oh, there were so many things because, obviously, once Jonathan came on the show, I would say that almost most of my scenes, most of my storylines had to do with Jonathan. In his case, I had already worked a bit. We worked very much on the same level. I don't know how else to explain it. We just came together and worked well together. And some of the best work that I feel that I did on the show was with either Johnny Carlin or Jonathan Frid. So there's nothing specific that I take away, except that Jonathan Frid had been primarily a stage actor, and then suddenly he was catapulted into the situation where he became, a celebrity. And it fit him like a glove. He handled it very well. He was a very down-to-earth, plain-spoken man. And as much as he enjoyed going on all of these television shows and promoting the show and so on, he kept a clear head. He didn't become the star, put it that way. And I think one of the reasons why Dark Shadows has had this enduring quality to it is that we functioned like a family. Maybe, that's the best expression. We were of all ages. We were all so different. And we were a family. We played all of these different roles. We worked like a little repertory company, and we were isolated in our own little studio. And somehow or another, I think all of that translated to the viewers, and they saw us as a cohesive group. And I don't know. I don't know. There's so many ideas racing through my brain because I've been reading all of the obituaries and tributes to Jonathan, and clearly, it makes me think about the fact that why should this little TV show become such an iconic thing. It's very interesting.
Yeah, the constant for the day that I found out, and obviously I wake up at 7 o'clock Eastern, and I see your posting on which was your obituary for Jonathan, and immediately it's like everyone I talked to over the course of the next 24 hours, the constant had been, oh, I'm so sorry to, I used to run home from.
I know. I'm terribly pleased that some of us did get a heads up.
Yes.
A few of us got phone calls so that we were prepared. And we were also, told that the family would be making an announcement. And I got authorization to post what I did. But it posted sometime after I fell asleep, went to bed. So when I woke up the next morning, I had 513 messages
wow.
on my email. Yeah. And the outpouring of, love and remembrance and everything was just wonderful. And then of course Laura and David each posted a beautiful tribute. And and we each spoke to what we knew of the splendid man.
Yes, and obviously the constant theme, in addition to just the collective of sigh of anguish, but at the same time the next reaction was, I used to run home from school.
I know. Well, here's the thing. If anybody, I was thrilled, by the way, that Johnny Depp and Tim Burton made wonderful comments. And in his tribute, Tim Burton, who is a great fan of Jonathan's and of the show, acknowledged that when we were all working together in England, Jonathan was already showing some frailty, and and I was careful, and so was Jim Pearson when we wrote about that experience, and so was Laura when we wrote about the experience of filming the cameos. But I was really pleased that Laura spoke plainly, following his death, and said, that indeed he was frail. It's not something you want to write when somebody is still alive. No. But the truth of the matter is, he was failing. And he had a fall. And I think we all, those of us who knew about that, sort of recognized that the end might be near. So we did have a little bit of a heads up, and I'm so glad. I can't imagine having awakened the next morning and found out that way. So David and Laura and I and a couple of others sort of knew.
It's interesting because Jonathan had been there for y'all back during that time, and being over there at Pinewood, and obviously Jonathan, more or less, on the one hand he was happy to be there, but on the other hand he wanted to go back to Hamilton, and yet God bless.
Yes, yeah. But I mean, yeah. I don't know. Laura said it, and if you read Dark Shadows: Return to Cullenwood, when I talk about that trip back there, it's pretty clear in what both of us wrote about that his frailty was such that we were just blessed that he could come. And by the way, I'm sorry, I must say this first. Jonathan was very anxious, eager to go to Pinewood. He wanted to play a cameo role.
Yes, ma'am.
And that was clear for months before we went. So he was up for all of that. But when we got there, we're talking about a 20-hour journey.
Exactly.
And when I say that, when we got on the set, yes, there was a bit of disorientation.
I can only imagine what it's. I've flown.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. I've flown twice to the UK, and I had the great fortune of just living in West Palm Beach, driving down to Miami, picking up Virgin or British, and just flying straight to Heathrow. For Jonathan, has to drive. His obviously Don, his nephew, drives into Toronto, then into New York, then all the way up.
No, I know. And by the way, you're going to be talking to Jim Pearson. This never ever would have come about if Jim Pearson hadn't been working behind the scenes.
Exactly.
And escorted Jonathan. He flew to Toronto, picked Jonathan up, flew with him to London, got him through customs, and got him up to Northamptonshire where we were staying. So that was a 20-hour journey for an almost 87-year-old man.
Well,
Jim deserves a tremendous amount of credit, and Jonathan, even though there was a bit of frailty and so on. He was thoroughly professional, and I think that what you've heard from Laura and what you've heard from me, you pretty much get the picture.
Oh, indeed. Just as much as Jonathan was there for y'all, when you were getting your acting teeth, cutting into some good roles, obviously, for y'all to more or less to do as your parents said and respect your elders and take good care of him. I said in Dark Shadows Return to Collinwood, in that piece that I wrote, I very clearly say, that even though it had been 45 years and we'd all gone our separate ways, once we all got together again, we were there as a team, we were there for each other, and we were certainly there for our most senior member. Yes. And I know that his presence will be felt in spirit come the Dark Shadows Festival coming up in July in Tarrytown, New York.
Also, the film opens on May 11th. It premieres on May 7th. And what I'm really thrilled about now is that, everyone has some context for seeing us in our cameo roles. They have when they see Jonathan on screen, they'll have a better idea. And I'm also incredibly grateful that Tim Burton and Johnny Depp had an opportunity to meet their their hero, that they had a chance to meet him and work with him. And Michelle Pfeiffer, too, is a big fan of Dark Shadows.
Indeed.
So I'm just thrilled that all worked. And, there's a fellow that lives down in your area. And by the way, I know your Tampa sort of area very well. There's a fellow that lives down there who used to be a cameraman.
Goodman.
His name is Stu Goodman,
that's right.
And he's got wonderful stories because he was there from the beginning.
That's right, and to wit, I am going to make it a point to give him a call right now because I appreciate your suggestion on that, and we'll be reaching him shortly. And then afterwards, Jim Pearson. I know, Kathryn Leigh Scott, it's been a rather interesting day. You've been meeting a lot of folks at the Hollywood Collectors Show, and I know
Laura and I have been sitting next to each other. We've got a lot of things coming up. First of all, Laura's got the reissue of her two novels, and Jim Pearson and I have Dark Shadows Return to Collinwood, and then my novel, Dark Passages. So there we were today at the Hollywood Collectors Show. And, Laura and I do these things together, mainly to support each other, but I think also the fans like seeing Josette and Angelique together again. But on Sunday, May 6th, we're going to be at the Los Angeles Comic Book and Science Fiction Convention. May 7th, we're going to be strolling down the red carpet together at the premiere of Dark Shadows. And then May 10th at the Vista Theater, there's going to be a double feature. At 6 o'clock, it's the film that Jonathan and I starred in, House of Dark Shadows, immediately followed by the very first public screening of Dark Shadows with Johnny Depp. So we've got a lot of things lined up, and then all of it leading up to the July 28th festival, in Tarrytown. So, and every event that we're doing, of course, all of it will be a tribute to Jonathan.
Of course. And that being said, if anybody is interested in purchasing Dark Shadows Return to Collinwood from Kathryn Leigh Scott, it's on Amazon.com. You can get it at Barnes & Noble as well. And you can also visit her website at www.kathrynleightscott.com. Her publishing company, Pomegranate Press, has been around ever since my scrapbook Memories of Dark Shadows first came out in 1986. And she has a number of titles in addition to the great history she's put out on Dark Shadows. Her website, pretty easy, P-O-M, as in Mary, Press.com. So just to let y'all know about that. And obviously, again, KathrynLeeScott.com if you want to find out where she's going to be, hopefully in your neck of the woods, stopping over at the nearest convention she's at and say hello. And obviously, she'll be most happy to talk to you as she's been very gracious enough to speak with me after a very long day. So, Kathryn Leigh Scott, I do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me on this broadcast of the Hour of Geek on Geek Radio 1490 as we pay tribute to Jonathan Frid tonight.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. My honor. My honor. Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.